Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today we are hitting you with the League One predictions, with the League Two predictions the other day. We're building up into the opening game week of the EFL, and I feel like I'm zoomed. Ooh, yes, as far as it's going out, which is really annoying because I would like to be further back. Let's just start a little second. Yeah, let's get into the predictions really, because League One is a bit more of an exciting league. We're going to do a 2-2 draw to open up the week with a Reading versus Luton game, which is really interesting. Notts County taking a point off Leicester, obviously newly promoted Notts County, while Oxford win 2-0 in their game against MK Dons. Blackpool with a 1-0 draw against Wickham. Seen a lot of draws in these first game weeks. Then Bradford win 2-0 in that first game for themselves. Burton Albion getting a draw against Stevenage. Cambridge with a 2-1 win over Wigan. That's a good start for their newly promoted team as well. Barnsley in a 2-2 draw at Bromley. We see Huddersfield beating Wimbledon. Leyton Orient getting beat by Sheffield Wednesday, opening the season with a win there. And Mansfield getting beaten by Doncaster, while Plymouth get a draw out of Stockport. So the first game week, that is a bit of a hectic one. We're going to see a 2-2 draw between Sheffield Wednesday and Bradford, while Doncaster beat Barnsley 2-1. Doncaster started off really well there. Luton then go into the next game with a 3-0 win against promoted Notts County. Wimbledon get a draw against Reading. Bromley a win over Cambridge, big for them. Leicester 3-0 win over Burton. We're going to see MK Dons getting beat by Huddersfield. Peterborough drawing with Mansfield. Stevenage getting a win over Oxford. We'll see Stockport with 3-1 win over Blackpool. And Wigan draw with Leyton Orient, while Wickham beat Plymouth. Plymouth starting off the season very shakily there. Blackpool with 3-1 win over Peterborough. We'll see MK Dons getting a 2-2 draw at Leicester. Leicester starting off shakily themselves and need to be up in their game. Cambridge getting a draw with Huddersfield. Leyton Orient with a 2-1 win over Barnsley. We're going to see Mansfield getting a 2-2 draw with Luton. We're going to see Notts County getting a 3-1 win over Burton, while Plymouth draw with Bradford. Sheffield Wednesday with a 2-0 win over Bromley. Stevenage beating Doncaster 2-1. With Stockport beating Wickham 3-1, and then Oxford a 2-0 win over Reading. We're going to keep on going to game week 5. We're going to look at the table in game week 5. Bradford beating Cambridge 3-1. Leyton Orient win that game away from home. Burton getting beat by Wimbledon away from home. Doncaster over 2-0 win over Notts County. Huddersfield beating Oxford at home there. Leicester putting 4 past Plymouth. Luton actually with a 2-1 win over Stockport, putting Luton in a good position at the start of the season. Stevenage beating Peterborough away. Wigan with a 2-0 win over MK Dons. Wickham with a 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday, while Reading get a 1-0 win over Mansfield. And Barnsley lose another game at home there to Blackpool. We're into game week 5, and we'll see where the table's at in game week 5 as Peterborough get a draw with Sheffield Wednesday. Wigan get beat by Stockport. Bradford beating Mansfield. Burton with a 2-0 win over Cambridge. Doncaster with a 3-2 win over Plymouth. Barnsley in a 2-1 win over Stevenage. Reading beating Blackpool 2-0. Huddersfield beating Notts County 3-1. Leicester losing at home to Oxford is a big one there, as Luton beat Leyton Orient. Wickham getting beat at home by MK Dons, and then Bromley getting beat at home by Wimbledon. See game week 5 there, and we can see Huddersfield top of the table without a loss yet. Luton and Bradford also without a loss. Huddersfield sat on 13 points. Obviously no one's got a perfect record in the first 5 games. Leicester sat in 9th place is pretty shambolic for them. Bottom of the table is Plymouth alongside Peterborough and Mansfield. 3 teams without a win so far. Mansfield having a strangely bad start to the season there. Burton pretty low though. Cambridge pretty low. MK Dons, Wigan. I mean, we're only 5 games into it, so it's hard to judge who's going to be low right now, but a few teams without a win on the board is crazy. Stevenage getting a 2-2 draw with Luton, while Leyton Orient beating Wickham. We're going to see Notts County get a 3-2 win over Bradford. Wimbledon in a 2-2 draw with Doncaster. Blackpool beating Bromley 2-0. Cambridge with a 2-1 win over Reading. That's a shocking one. Mansfield with a 2-1 win over Huddersfield. We'll see MK Dons with a 2-0 win over Peterborough there. Oxford beating Burton Albion. Plymouth drawing with Barnsley. Sheffield Wednesday in a 2-0 win over Wigan. And Stockport losing to Leicester at home. Not good stuff. Wimbledon winning their game against MK Dons. Burton getting beat by Mansfield. Barnsley in a 1-0 draw with Leicester. Blackpool in a 3-0 win over Plymouth. Plymouth still not getting on the road there. Huddersfield beating Bromley there. Reading in a 2-0 win over Notts County. Leyton Orient getting a 2-1 win over Stevenage. Luton beating Bradford. Oxford in a 2-0 win over Cambridge. while Peterborough get beat by Doncaster, Sheffield Wednesday getting beat by Stockport, and then Wigan getting beat by Wickham. Game week 10 is when we're going to calculate again next and see where we're at there. I just I'm shiny today. 3-1 against Bradford and Barnes today. Cambridge in a 2-all draw with Wimbledon. Doncaster beating Oxford there. Doncaster on a really good run right now. Luton getting beat by Huddersfield. Leicester with 2-0 win over Wigan. We're going to see Mansfield with a 2-1 win over Leyton Orient. MK Dons beating Bromley. Notts County getting a draw out of Blackpool. Plymouth in a 2-0 win over Burton. Stevenage in a 3-2 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Stockport beating Peterborough, and Wycombe getting a draw already. We're going to get to game week 10. That's when we calculate. Game week 10, Wimbledon losing at home to Stevenage, while Blackpool get a win over Leicester. Leicester up and down and all over the place. Burton getting a 2-all draw with Huddersfield, while Barnsley in a 3-1 win over MK Dons. Reading drawing with Bradford. Leyton Orient in a 2-1 win over Plymouth. Luton beating Doncaster. Oxford getting a draw with Stockport there. Peterborough with a 1-0 win over Notts County. Sheffield Wednesday beating Cambridge, and Wigan losing at home to Mansfield. We're getting there. 3-0 win for Bradford against Leyton Orient. Cambridge in a 1-all draw at Blackpool. Doncaster beating Burton. Huddersfield beating Sheffield Wednesday. Leicester beating Peterborough. Mansfield beating Bromley. MK Dons in a loss to Reading. Notts County getting beat by Oxford. Plymouth drawing with Wimbledon. Have a draw there. It's not good for Plymouth. Plymouth need to cut it out with the draws. 3-1 for Stockport there, and Luton win their game. 10 games in, and Huddersfield are still top of the table on 23 points. Now Doncaster in second place, Luton up there, Stockport up there, Stevenage up there, and Oxford are the only relegated team from the Championship to be making it into the playoff spots for League One right now. Wigan bottom of the table alongside Peterborough, Burton and Plymouth still in that relegation zone, still looking bad for themselves. Leicester sat where 7th, just outside of the promotion spots, where they could still get their way into. We'll wait and see as Bradford get a 3-2 win over Stevenage. Barnes with a 3-0 win over Cambridge. Leicester beating Doncaster. Leyton Orient in a 1-0 draw at Blackpool. Mansfield getting a draw out of Oxford. We'll see MK Dons getting beat by Reading. Peterborough 2-0 win over Burton. Plymouth in a 2-1 win over Huddersfield. Sheffield Wednesday in a 3-1 win over AFC Wimbledon. Stockport beating Bromley there. Wigan in a 1-0 win over Reading, and Wycombe at the bottom of the table there drawing with Notts County. Then Wimbledon come with a loss to Mansfield. Blackpool beating MK Dons. Bromley getting a draw out of Leicester. Burton and Bradford drawing. We see Cambridge in a 3-2 win over Wycombe there. Doncaster in a loss to Stockport. Huddersfield with a win over Peterborough. We see Luton and Barnsley in a 4-2 game there. We see Notts County getting beat by Sheffield Wednesday. Oxford beating Wigan. Stevenage beating Plymouth, and then Reading getting beat by Leyton Orient at home. Wimbledon then lose to Wycombe at home. Blackpool then beat Mansfield. See Bromley with a 3-1 win over Peterborough. Burton with a 2-1 win over Leyton Orient. Cambridge getting a 1-0 draw at Plymouth. Doncaster in a 2-0 draw at Sheffield Wednesday. Reading beating Barnsley 2-1. Huddersfield with a 3-0 win over Wigan, and a 3-0 draw between Luton and Leicester, while Notts County getting beat by Stockport. Oxford and Bradford in a 3-0 draw, and Stevenage beating MK Dons. Okay, game of 15 we calculate next. Bradford beating Huddersfield. Barnsley in a loss to Oxford. See Leicester beating Stevenage. Leyton Orient in a 2-0 win over Cambridge. We're going to see Mansfield beating Notts County. MK Dons getting beat by Doncaster. Peterborough getting a 1-0 win over Luton is good for them. Plymouth a 2-1 win over Reading. Sheffield Wednesday in a 2-0 win there. Stockport County beating Wimbledon. Wigan with a 1-0 win over Bromley, and Wycombe beating Burton there. Bottom of the table, Wimbledon in a loss at home to Blackpool. Bromley with a 1-0 win over Notts County. Doncaster with a 2-1 win. Leicester getting beat at home by Bradford. Luton what are we talking about there? MK Dons getting beat by Burton. We see Peterborough getting beat by Oxford. Sheffield Wednesday, Plymouth drawing. Stevenage with a 2-0 win over Mansfield. Stockport putting 4 past Reading. Wigan with a 2-1 win over Barnsley, and Huddersfield beating Wycombe. 15 games in, and Stockport are now top of the table. Huddersfield are in second place, 3 losses on the board for themselves. It all is a very, very tight table, as it should be in these positions here. There is actually a 4-point gap between Leyton Orient and Reading, and that's where the kind of gap appears. Barnsley in the relegation zone, currently relegation zone. Notts County, MK Dons, Peterborough and Burton. No one's solidifying themselves as the one to go for it right now. Leicester still not in the playoff spots, 15 games in. Would be very worrying. They've only lost 3 games. And obviously Huddersfield have lost 3 games. We're just drawing too much. Need to turn that around, and hopefully they can turn it around by halfway through. Blackpool 2-1 over Wigan. See Bradford beating Doncaster. Burton losing to Luton. Cambridge losing to Stockport. Barnsley in a 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Reading drawing with Bromley. Huddersfield beating Leicester, keeping Huddersfield near the top. Leyton Orient with a win over Wimbledon. Mansfield beating MK Dons. We're going to see Notts County drawing with Stevenage. Oxford beating Wickham, and then Plymouth beating Peterborough. We're moving all the way to game 23. All the way to game 23 now. Wimbledon with a draw to Barnsley. Bromley with a 2-0 win over Burton, pushing for their safety. Doncaster and Huddersfield drawing. Leicester beating Mansfield 3-0, while Luton get a 2-1 win over Oxford. MK Dons beating Notts County. Peterborough in a 1-1 draw with Cambridge, while Reading getting beat there. Stevenage getting a win over Blackpool. Notts County win over Leyton Orient. Wigan in a 2-1 win over Plymouth, and Bradford beating Wickham. Blackpool then draw with Luton. We see Bradford with a 3-1 win over MK Dons, but now being beaten Wigan. Cambridge drawing with Leicester. Barnes with a 3-0 win over Wickham. Huddersfield losing at home to Stevenage, while Leyton Orient beat Peterborough. Mansfield getting beat by Stockport. Notts County with a 2-0 win over AFC Wimbledon. Oxford beating Sheffield Wednesday. Plymouth with a 2-0 win over Bromley, and Reading getting a win over Doncaster. Bradford lose at home to AFC Wimbledon, which is a shocking one. Burton then beat Reading. Bromley get a 1-0 draw with Doncaster. Huddersfield drawing with Leyton Orient. You see Leicester beating Sheffield Wednesday. Luton beating Wigan. Mansfield losing at home to Wickham. MK Dons drawing with Cambridge. Notts County losing to Plymouth. Oxford beating Blackpool. We're going to see Peterborough get a 1-0 win over Barnsley, while Stevenage draw with Stockport. Wimbledon then get a 2-1 win over Oxford. Blackpool in a 2-0 win over Burton. Bromley in a 1-1 draw with Bradford. Cambridge getting beat by Stevenage. Barnsley getting a draw getting beat by Huddersfield. Reading in a 1-1 draw with Leicester. Leyton Orient beating Notts County. Plymouth drawing with Mansfield. Sheffield Wednesday getting beat by Luton. Stockport beating MK Dons. Wigan beating Peterborough, and Wickham getting a draw with Doncaster. I'm drawing the board for them there. Bradford and Stockport drawing. Burton in a 1-0 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Doncaster in a 3-0 win over Wigan. We're going to see Huddersfield in a 4-1 win over Blackpool. Leicester in a 5-0 win over Wimbledon. Luton put in 4 past Bromley. It's a big day for goals, as Mansfield beat Barnsley. MK Dons beating Leyton Orient. We're going to see Notts County draw with Cambridge. Oxford draw with Plymouth. Peterborough with a win over Wickham, and Stevenage beating Reading. A lot of home wins in that game week, as Wimbledon beat Luton. Blackpool beating Bradford. I've fallen off a little bit there. Bromley with a draw against Oxford. Cambridge and Doncaster drawing. Barnsley 3-1 win over Burton. We see Leyton Orient getting beat by Leicester. Plymouth and MK Dons in a 0-0 draw. Sheffield Wednesday and Mansfield in a 0-0 draw. Stockport put in 4 past Huddersfield to solidify where they are in the table. Wigan with a 2-1 win over Notts County. Wickham with a 2-0 win over Stevenage, and then Reading drawing with Peterborough. Going to get to game 23 here, as Wimbledon beat Peterborough. Blackpool in a 3-2 loss to Doncaster. Bromley beating Stevenage. Cambridge with a 1-0 win over Mansfield. Barnsley getting beat by Notts County. Reading beating MK Dons. Leyton Orient beating Oxford. We're going to see Plymouth in a 1-0 win over Luton. Sheffield Wednesday beating Huddersfield. Stockport putting 5 past Burton Albion there. Wigan getting beat by Bradford, and then Wickham getting beat by Leicester. Halfway through the season, and Stockport are still top of the table, on for a record amount of goals. Only lost twice so far. Luton in second place, and they are leaving Leicester behind. Leicester on 43 points and a lot closer. 4 teams on 43 points there. Bradford, Huddersfield and Stevenage all sat on 43 points. Oxford just 2 points behind them. Doncaster are up there. Blackpool are still up there in the argument. Leyton Orient. Sheffield Wednesday probably dropped off the argument quite a bit, but you know they could still get themselves in that argument. Relegation currently under Notts County, MK Dons, Peterborough and Burton, but it's all going to be close as we get into the end of the season. Barnsley low down. Bromley doing well for themselves, I would say. Wimbledon as well. But you expect some better off, like teams like Reading and stuff like that. Sheffield Wednesday we expect a lot better off. Oxford, especially not being in the top 6, is a shock as well. But the fight for it is on. The fight for it is on. Jack Wilshere's leaving that Luton team very, very well. On to the second half of the season now, as we get off with a Bradford 3-1 win over Bromley. Burton getting a 2-1 win over Blackpool. Doncaster beating Wycombe 2-0. Huddersfield in a 3-1 win over Barnsley. Leicester beating Reading 2-0. No one's letting off on that one. Luton drawing with Sheffield Wednesday. Mansfield beating Plymouth. MK Dons losing to Stockport. Notts County with 2-0 over Leyton Orient. Oxford beating Wimbledon. Peterborough beating Wigan. And Stevenage with a 2-0 win over Cambridge. We're not going to calculate again now till game week 31. Wimbledon with a 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Blackpool getting beat by Leyton Orient. Bromley with a 1-1 draw against Stockport. Once again, doing well for themselves. Burton with 2-1 over Peterborough. Cambridge with a 2-1 win over Barnsley. Doncaster drawing with Leicester. Reading in a 3-1 win over Wigan. Huddersfield beating Plymouth. Luton beating MK Dons. We've seen Notts County lose to Wycombe. Oxford beating Mansfield. And Stevenage and Bradford drawing. 11 points. Bradford beating Burton there. Barnsley getting a 1-0 win over Luton. Been chasing it. Leicester putting 4 past Bromley. Leyton Orient getting beat by Reading at home. Mansfield drawing with AFC Wimbledon. MK Dons beating Blackpool. Peterborough getting beat by Huddersfield. Plymouth with a 1-0 win over Stevenage. While Sheffield Wednesday get 2-0 win over Notts County. Stockport getting a 3-2 win over Doncaster. Wigan getting a draw with Oxford and Wycombe beating Cambridge. Bradford then would lose to Oxford at home. Barnsley get a 2-1 win against Reading. Leicester beating Luton probably puts them further in that race. Leyton Orient beating Burton. Mansfield and Blackpool drawing. MK Dons getting beat by Stevenage. Peterborough in a 2-0 win over Bromley as they try and make their great escape. Plymouth with a 3-1 win over Cambridge there. Sheffield Wednesday beating Doncaster, while Stockport continue the path that they're on of just thrashing opponents. A 1-0 win there for Wigan, and then Wycombe getting beat at home by Wimbledon. Wimbledon keep up the good form of 2-0 draw against Stockport. Blackpool a 2-0 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Bromley with a 1-0 win over Wigan. Burton getting beat 1-0 at home by Wycombe. Cambridge in a 2-1 win over Leyton Orient. Doncaster drawing with MK Dons. Reading beating Plymouth. See Huddersfield beating Bradford. Luton putting 4 past Peterborough. They want to go up. Notts County a 1-0 win over Mansfield. Oxford getting a 2-0 win there. And Stevenage getting a draw with Leicester. Another draw for Leicester, just drawing way too many games. Bradford getting beat at home by Plymouth. Another loss at home for Bradford there. Bromley with a 1-1 draw with Sheffield Wednesday. Burton and Notts County in a 0-0 draw. We see Doncaster getting beat by Stevenage. Barnsley with a 2-1 win over Leyton Orient. Reading drawing with Oxford. Huddersfield there with a win there. Leicester with 1-0 win MK Dons just edging it out. Luton beating Mansfield. Peterborough in a 1-0 draw with Blackpool. Wigan beating Wimbledon. And then Wycombe getting a draw out of Stockport. Interesting stuff there. Wimbledon drawing them with Burton. Blackpool getting beat at home by Barnsley. Cambridge in a 2-0 draw with Bradford. Leyton Orient beating Bromley. Mansfield getting beat by Reading. MK Dons beating Wigan. We'll see Notts County draw with Doncaster. Oxford beating Huddersfield. Plymouth with a 2-1 win over Leicester. Sheffield Wednesday beating Wycombe. We're going to see Stevenage beating Peterborough. And Stockport losing at home to Luton. Once again, Luton won that gap as well. Wimbledon winning 2-0 against Bromley. We're going to calculate in this game week and see where we are at in this game week here. Go with it. Let's keep going with it. As Blackpool in a 2-1 win there. Cambridge beating Burton 3-0. Leyton Orient and Luton drawing. Mansfield beating Bradford. Bradford on a bit of a fall off here. We'll see draw there. We'll see Huddersfield win that game away. Oxford beating Leicester. You know, maybe Oxford could make a push for it towards the end. Sheffield Wednesday will 1-0 over Peterborough. Stevenage getting a 0-0 draw with Barnsley, and Stockport putting 6 past Wigan. Calculating the table, and obviously Stockport are still top with 15 games to go. They're on 70 points now. They've made that gap ahead of them. They look like they're going to win the league. They are pushing on to win the league. Everyone else is kind of still bundled up and getting a bit close. I mean, actually, Leicester have made a bit of a gap between themselves, and 8th place is 11 points there, as they have a clear top 6 chasing for it. Bradford are close by, but you know, these bigger teams are just going for it. Relegation zone is still very, very close. Burton, MK Dons, Peterborough, and Notts County now bottom of the table. It's going to be exciting going into the last 15 games. I imagine there's only a lot of points as teams are pushing through. Bradford with a 3-2 win over Notts County. Bromley beating Blackpool. Burton with a loss to Oxford. Doncaster beating Wimbledon. Barnsley with a 3-0 win over Plymouth. Big stuff. Reading losing at home to Cambridge is huge. Huddersfield, nope, in a 1-0 draw. We're going to go. Leicester beating Stockport there. Luton with a 2-0 win over Stevenage. Peterborough getting a 1-0 win over MK Dons. Wigan drawing with Sheffield Wednesday, and then Wycombe with a 2-0 win over Leyton Orient. Keep going. Blackpool 2-1 win over Wimbledon. Bradford with a 2-2 draw against Leicester. Now 3-2 win over Leicester. Burton with a 1-0 win over MK Dons, going to do well for themselves. Cambridge with a 2-0 win over Peterborough. Barnsley actually losing to Wigan at home as Reading lose to Stockport. Huddersfield with a 1-0 win over Wycombe. Leyton Orient beating Doncaster. Mansfield beating Stevenage. We'll see Notts County and Bromley getting a 1-0 draw. Now 2-1 win to Notts County actually. Oxford beating Luton. We're going to see Plymouth with a 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday as well. Wimbledon and Huddersfield in a 1-1 draw, while Bromley beat Barnsley 1-0. Doncaster getting beat by Mansfield. Leicester beating Notts County. We see Luton beating Reading. MK Dons in a 1-1 draw with Oxford. Peterborough in a 2-0 win over Bradford is big. Sheffield Wednesday beating Leyton Orient. Stevenage getting a 1-0 win over Burton. Stockport beating Plymouth. Wigan in a 2-1 win over Cambridge, and then Wycombe beating Blackpool. Game week 36 when we calculate next, guys. Game week 36, Blackpool get a draw against Stockport. Bradford then get 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday. Burton in a 3-1 loss there. Cambridge getting a win over Bromley. Barnsley beating Doncaster, can be good for themselves. Reading getting a draw with Wimbledon. Huddersfield beating MK Dons. Leyton Orient getting a win over Wigan. Mansfield drawing with Peterborough. Notts County in a 2-1 win over Luton. That's going to be a shocker of the season. Oxford getting beat by Stevenage, and then Plymouth with a 2-0 win over Wycombe. One more game we're going to calculate again and see where we're at, as Wimbledon then get the result over Leyton Orient. Bromley getting beat by Reading. Doncaster getting beat by Bradford. Leicester with 2-1 win over Huddersfield. Luton beating Burton 3-0. MK Dons beating Mansfield. Peterborough 2-1 win over Plymouth. Big for them as they try and get out. Sheffield Wednesday beating Barnsley. Stevenage getting a 1-0 win over Notts County. Stockport beating Cambridge 3-0. Wigan with a 1-0 win over Blackpool. And then Wycombe getting beat by Oxford. 10 games left, and Stockport are still top of the table. Top of the table by 9 points clear off the promotion spots there, which is really, really good for themselves. Leicester still making their way in the push up there. But there's a 10-point gap between Bradford and Sheffield Wednesday. They need to push that up. Sheffield Wednesday, they need to start putting some more wins on the board for themselves. Relegation zone is now Bromley, Burton, Notts County and MK Dons, but it's all still going to be very close. It's all still going to be very close with 10 games to go. All the way up to Bradford, can still get relegated with 10 games to go. Bradford then get a 2-0 win over Wigan. Burton with a 1-0 win over Stockport. Stockport, who were top of the table, getting beat by a team in the relegation zone. Huge stuff. Doncaster beating Blackpool 2-1. Huddersfield losing to Reading. Leicester winning against Wycombe there. Luton draw with Plymouth. We're going to see Mansfield beating Cambridge. MK Dons get beat by Sheffield Wednesday. Notts County will win over Barnsley. Oxford with a 2-0 win over Leyton Orient. Peterborough with a 1-0 win over Wimbledon, is going to do well for themselves, and Stevenage getting a 1-0 win over Bromley. Moving on to game week 38, as Wimbledon get beat by Oxford. Blackpool beating Oxford, Bromley beating Doncaster, Cambridge with a win over MK Dons, Barnsley getting beat by Mansfield, Reading with a 1-0 win over Stevenage, Leyton Orient with a 2-1 win over Huddersfield, Plymouth beating Notts County, Sheffield Wednesday beating Burton. We're going to see Stockport lose to Bradford at home, Wigan beating by Luton, and then Wycombe beating Peterborough. Game week 41 is what I'm going to calculate again. Game week 41 we're going to calculate again and see where we're at there, as Bradford with a 3-2 win over Blackpool, Burton with a 1-0 win over Barnsley. It's going to try and help them out. Doncaster beating Cambridge 2-0. Huddersfield beating Stockport. Have the rails come off? Have the rails come off? As Luton beat Wimbledon, Mansfield lose to Sheffield Wednesday, MK Dons beating Plymouth 2-0, Notts County with a 2-1 win over Wigan, Oxford beating Bromley there, Peterborough getting a draw with Reading, and then Stevenage beating Wycombe. Game week 41 we're going to calculate, guys. Game week 41, Wimbledon beating Bradford, Blackpool with a 3-1 win over Huddersfield, Bromley getting a draw out of Luton, Cambridge with a 2-0 win over Notts County, Barnsley beating Peterborough, Reading with a 1-0 win over Burton, Leyton Orient getting a 2-0 win over MK Dons, Plymouth getting beat by Oxford, Sheffield Wednesday beating Leicester, who are making the push for themselves, Wigan in a 2-1 win over Doncaster, and then Wycombe drawing with Mansfield. One more game we're going to calculate, guys. Calculate again, as Wimbledon lose at home to Cambridge, Blackpool beating Notts County, Bromley with a 1-0 win over MK Dons, Burton with a 2-0 win over Plymouth, Barnsley and Bradford in a 1-1 draw, Leyton Orient beating Mansfield there, Luton beating Huddersfield, Doncaster getting a 2-2 draw there, Peterborough getting beat by Stockport, Wednesday getting a 1-1 win over Stevenage, Wigan in a 3-1 loss by Leicester, and then Reading win their game 2-0. 5 games to go after this one, 5 games to go, and we can see Stockport still top of the table. They've only had 6 points in the last 5 games. They've had a bit of a shakedown. And it's now a lot closer between that top 4. That top 4 is 5 points in it, and then there's the gap. There's a gap that forms Bradford and Stevenage and Huddersfield in that gap. And Sheffield Wednesday got themselves back in the argument, you'd say. The team's building up losses. Burton, Peterborough, Notts County and MK Dons on the relegation zone, but with 5 games left, still all the way up to Doncaster can still get relegated. All the way up to Doncaster can drag themselves into this relegation battle. We'll wait and see how that goes. We're going to go 2 more games ahead, and it's going to be 3 games left on this one. Bradford with a 2-1 win over Luton. It's going to be big for Luton there. Cambridge getting a 3-0 win over Oxford. It's going to do them a lot of favours. Doncaster beating Peterborough, Huddersfield with a 1-0 win over Bromley, Leicester beating Barnsley 2-1, Mansfield drawing with Burton, MK Dons beating Wimbledon, Notts County in a 2-1 win over Reading, Plymouth beating Blackpool 2-0, Stevenage losing to Leyton Orient. We're going to see Stockport with a 2-1 loss to Sheffield Wednesday. Sheffield Wednesday trying to make their way up. Wycombe beating Wigan 2-0. One more game, we can see Wimbledon with a 3-3 draw with Plymouth, Blackpool in a 3-0 win there, Bromley getting beat by Mansfield, Burton in a 2-2 draw with Doncaster, Barnsley then get a draw out of Stockport, what has happened? What has happened there? Reading beating Huddersfield. We're going to see Bradford win their game, Luton beating Wycombe. We're going to see Oxford in a 2-1 over Notts County, Peterborough getting a draw out of Leicester, Sheffield Wednesday beating MK Dons, and Wigan beating Stevenage with 3 games to go. 3 games to go. Stevenage have fell off the face of the earth. Oxford, Leicester, it's all still very, very close. All the way down to Bradford can still win the league. Relegation zone all the way up to Wycombe can still get caught inside the relegation zone. Burton and outside of it. Bromley, who have had a really good season, some really good upsets along the way, now in the relegation zone. MK Dons have not been relegated, but they're a game away. They're a game away from it happening. Notts County, Peterborough and Bromley look like they're going to survive to the final day. We'll wait and see where it goes as Bradford beat Reading 2-0. Cambridge getting beaten by Sheffield Wednesday. Doncaster with a 2-0 win over Luton. Luton letting things slip towards the end of the season as well. Leicester with a 2-1 win over Blackpool, Mansfield getting a draw out of Wigan, MK Dons with a 2-1 win over Barnsley, Notts County beating Peterborough 2-0, Plymouth with a 3-1 win over Leyton Orient, Stevenage beating Wimbledon, Stockport County beating Oxford, Wycombe then drawing with Bromley. Blackpool then beat Stevenage. We're going to see Bradford with a 3-1 win over Wycombe. Burton with a 1-0 win over Bromley is going to put Bromley in a very big bit of turmoil there. Barnsley with a 2-0 win over Wimbledon is going to help them out a lot. Reading in a 1-1 draw with Sheffield Wednesday. Huddersfield in a 2-1 draw with Doncaster. Leyton Orient with a 1-1 draw against Stockport. Leicester win their game. Notts County getting beat by MK Dons. Oxford with a 2-0 win over Peterborough, and then Plymouth with a 2-1 win over Wigan. One game left, and Stockport still top of the table, level on points with Leicester. Stockport have scored 108 goals this season. Leicester can also do it. I mean, there's 5 goal difference in it as the last game of the season. Luton still win the league as well. Oxford are in the playoffs. Bradford are in the playoffs. And then it is between Huddersfield, Sheffield Wednesday and Stevenage for our last playoff spot. Stevenage being there most of the season, but the rest of it is still very, very close. Bromley have not been relegated yet, neither have Notts County. Both can still survive on the last day to replace Burton or Wigan in their place. MK Dons are down, Peterborough are down, bottom of the table on 41 points. It's very, very close. Last game of the season, let's see. Wimbledon with a 2-1 win over Notts County. If you're not relegated to Notts County, as I said. Bromley with a 1-0 win over Plymouth, though, is huge. Doncaster with a 3-1 win over Reading. We'll see Leicester putting 4 past Cambridge. Luton in a 2-1 win over Blackpool. We're going to see Bradford get a draw with MK Dons. Peterborough, last day of the season, beat Leyton Orient just for the sake of it. Sheffield Wednesday beating Oxford is going to be massive for them to try and get in the playoff spots. Stevenage then beat Huddersfield. Stockport with a 3-0 win over Mansfield. Wigan beating Burton, and then Wycombe and Barnsley drawing bottom of the table. That means Stockport win the league on a 4-goal difference, scoring 111 goals throughout the season. Absolutely demolishing it. As you can see, it's got Luton versus Sheffield Wednesday and Oxford versus Bradford. I think Luton beat Sheffield Wednesday. Bradford beat Oxford over 2 legs, and we get Luton versus Bradford, and then we get Bradford beating Luton and Bradford going into the Championship. Massive, massive stuff. Burton get relegated on the last day. Bromley survive. Peterborough go down. MK Dons go down. And Notts County go down. Bottom of the table, despite going into the last day in 21st. Going out without a bang there. Bromley survive with their first season in League One. Wigan down there on 49 points as well. Wimbledon, Barnsley having a pretty terrible season for their standards. Wycombe pretty low on 51 points. Cambridge surviving on 52 points. They've done really well for themselves there. Got away from that relegation fight. Mansfield, Reading, Leyton Orient, Plymouth making it middle of the table. Blackpool in there as well. But yeah, Doncaster and Stevenage have a massive, massive gap in between them there. There's too many draws for Doncaster and too many losses for the teams after that. But Stockport win the league. That is the story there. 94 points, level on points with Leicester. They do not break the 100-point mark, but they have a competitive season. Stockport were probably the better team for the whole season. But yeah, that is the end of the video, guys. If you like the video, please leave a like. Let me know your predictions in the comments, and I want to see more of you guys. So thank you very much.